Hey, Holy Girl, welcome back to Holy Girl Talk. I'm so glad you're here today because we're about to talk about a woman who perfectly embodies the era so many of us are stuck in the busy girl era. So before we get into it, inhale with me, unclench your jaw, roll your shoulders back, release that tension you've been carrying since Monday, and just be, because today's conversation is going to hit you in the I'm fine, but actually I'm overwhelmed part of your soul. And listen, if this is your first time tuning in, welcome to the lounge, babe. This is your spiritual group chat, the place where high capacity women come to breathe, heal, laugh, cry a little, and get real about what's happening in their inner world. If God led you here, trust me, He's trying to tell you something about your pace, your peace, or the pressure you've been silently carrying. And if you're a returning listener, girl, I already know your calendar is full, your brain is buzzing, and your to do list is judging you. So this episode is for you too. Today, we're stepping into the story of Martha, the original overbooked, overstimulated, type A older sister of the Bible. Martha is that girl, organized, dependable, productive, constantly doing everything for everyone. And while all of that is amazing, her story exposes something we don't always want to admit. Sometimes our need to handle everything becomes the very thing that pulls us away from God, from peace, and from ourselves. So get comfy, close out those mental tabs you had open all day, because we're about to talk about responsibility, burnout, performance pressure, emotional overwhelm, and what it truly looks like to slow down long enough to let God love you. Let's get into it. So picture the scene with me for a second. Jesus, the actual Messiah, the miracle worker, the teacher everyone is talking about, is coming over to Martha's house. And Martha is that girl who wants everything perfect. You know her, you might be her. The candles are lit, the floors are swept, the dinner is planned down to the garnish. She isn't doing this to impress Jesus. She genuinely loves him. She wants to honor him. She wants to make space for him in the best way she knows how, through service. And honestly, this is how so many of us show love too. We host, we plan, we organize, we make sure everyone has what they need. We make everything look effortless even though we're sweating in the background. Martha isn't doing anything sinful. She's doing what many women naturally do. She's holding everything together. But here's where her story hits home. When Jesus arrives, Martha's heart is in the right place, but her anxiety starts driving the car. Suddenly, the house doesn't look clean enough. The meal doesn't seem good enough. She's mentally running through every detail. Did I stir the stew? Did I forget the bread? Is the water boiling? Is the table set? Is everything perfect? The weight of being the responsible one starts to swallow the joy of the moment. And that's when we start seeing ourselves in Martha. Because how many times have you been so busy preparing for a moment that you couldn't actually be in it? How often do you take on the hosting, the planning, the emotional labor, the responsibility? Not because anyone asked you to, but because you feel like it's on you to make everything work. Martha teaches us something important before Jesus even speaks. Sometimes your desire to love well becomes the very thing that exhausts you. She wasn't wrong for wanting to serve. She wasn't wrong for caring. She wasn't wrong for preparing. But somewhere between welcoming Jesus and working for Jesus, she lost sight of being with Jesus. And girl, that happens to us all the time. We run around doing a million things for God, for family, for work, for everyone, and miss the quiet, present, grounding moments that actually nourish our soul. Martha started with a full heart, but a full heart can still get overwhelmed when the to-do list gets louder than God's presence. Martha didn't start stressed, she started sincere. She genuinely wanted to do something beautiful for Jesus. But somewhere between prepping the meal and managing the moment, her good intentions quietly morphed into heavy expectations she put on herself. Suddenly, it wasn't just about serving Jesus, it was about doing it perfectly. And perfection has a way of sucking the joy out of even the most meaningful things. You know that shift, the one where enthusiasm becomes pressure? That moment when I want to do this turns into I have to do this or everything falls apart? It's subtle, it sneaks up on you, and before you know it, you're spiraling in your own mental checklist like your life is an endless audition. You're terrified of failing. And here's the part we don't always admit. Most of Martha's stress wasn't caused by Jesus, it was caused by her own internal expectations. Jesus didn't ask for a 5-course dinner. He didn't ask for the perfect environment. He didn't ask her to perform. He simply came to be with her. But Martha, like so many of us, equated love with labor. She equated value with productivity. She equated closeness with contribution. She believed the way to honor Jesus was through effort, even if the effort drained her. And girl, how often do we do the same? How often do we attach our worth to doing instead of being? How often do we measure our closeness to God by our productivity instead of our presence? How often do we assume rest is irresponsible and slowing down is a luxury we haven't earned? Martha's intention was pure, but her pace was punishing. She tried to hold everything together, forgetting that nothing falls apart when God is in the room. Her desire to serve turned into a pressure to perform, and that pressure started robbing her of the very peace Jesus came to give her. Good intentions become heavy expectations when we forget that God cares more about our heart than our hustle. He wants connection, not burnout. He wants presence, not the version of us that's stretched thin and irritated. Martha wasn't exhausted because she was doing a bad thing. She was exhausted because she was doing a good thing from an anxious place. And sis, that's where so many modern women live: cooking, cleaning, organizing, planning, managing, achieving, showing up, taking care of everything while slowly suffocating under the weight of their own expectations. This is where her story starts to confront us gently. What are you carrying that God never asked you to hold alone? What pressure is draining you more than it's serving you? Where have your intentions turned into emotional obligation? Martha shows us that burnout doesn't always come from doing too much. Sometimes it comes from caring too much in the wrong way. It doesn't take long before Martha's internal pressure starts bubbling to the surface. She's cooking, cleaning, prepping, serving, and trying to manage the entire moment by herself, while her sister Mary is literally just sitting there, sitting at Jesus' feet, relaxed, unbothered, in the moment, receiving something Martha didn't even realize she was allowed to have: rest. And that's when Martha breaks. She storms into the room, not with malice, but with pent up frustration, exhaustion, and emotional overload, and she says the line that reveals exactly what's happening in her heart. Lord, don't you care? Girl, if that's not the most relatable spiritual meltdown ever, because don't you care is what we say when the weight gets too heavy. It's what we whisper when we feel alone. It's what we scream into pillows when we feel unseen. It's what slips out when we've been operating at a level of responsibility that nobody notices or appreciates. It's what we think when we're drowning in obligations while everyone else seems relaxed. Martha wasn't mad at Mary. She was overwhelmed by the silence of others toward her suffering. Her meltdown wasn't about chores. It was about feeling unsupported, unseen, unappreciated, and unheard. And Jesus, the one she's trying so hard to impress, is right there, seemingly watching her struggle. So she finally says the thing she's been holding. Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work? Tell her to help me. Read that again through a modern lens. God, why am I the only one carrying this? Why does everyone expect me to handle everything? Why is no one helping me? Why do I feel so alone? Don't you see me? Don't you care? That right there is the emotional climax of Martha's story. And it's why her narrative hits every woman who has ever been the responsible one: the strong friend, the default caretaker, the planner, the doer, the fixer, the one who just handles it. Because Martha reveals the truth. Sometimes busyness is a shield for the deeper fear that if we stop, everything will fall apart, including us. And Jesus doesn't shame her for this moment. He doesn't snap back. He doesn't dismiss her emotions. He doesn't call her dramatic. He sees her. He hears her. He responds with love and a gentle realignment that changes everything. Martha's breaking point is not her downfall, it's her invitation. An invitation to slow down, to breathe, to let go, to stop equating worth with work, to realize she doesn't have to hold everything alone. This moment shows us that God doesn't just care, He cares enough to interrupt your burnout. When Martha finally breaks and pours out her frustration, Jesus doesn't roll his eyes. He doesn't tell her to stop being dramatic. He doesn't say, calm down, you're overreacting. He doesn't shame her for being overwhelmed. Instead, he speaks her name twice. Martha, Martha. It's the tone you use when someone you love is spiraling and you want to bring them back home to themselves. A tone of tenderness, not tension. It's like Jesus is saying, hey, breathe. I see you. Come back to me. Then he gently says, you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is necessary. Girl, let that sink in. Jesus wasn't correcting her cooking. He wasn't critiquing her hosting skills. He wasn't policing her effort. He was addressing the state of her heart. He could see the anxiety swirling beneath her service. He could see how her desire to perform was suffocating her ability to be present. He could see that she was doing everything for him but nothing with him. He wasn't saying her work was wrong, he was saying her worry was heavy. This moment reveals something so profound for modern women. Jesus isn't asking you to stop being capable, he's asking you to stop being consumed. There's a difference. You can cook, clean, organize, work, serve, volunteer, lead, and show up beautifully, but not if anxiety is driving the wheel. Not if exhaustion is your identity. Not if you're operating from obligation instead of intimacy. Then Jesus points to Mary and says, Mary has chosen the better portion, and it will not be taken from her. He's not comparing the sisters to compete. He's repositioning Martha's heart so she can receive the same peace Mary is experiencing. He's saying, you don't have to earn my presence. You don't have to perform for my love. You don't have to exhaust yourself to be close to me. I'm here. Sit with me. Slow down. Let me pour into you. For the girl who has been on autopilot for years, for the girl whose worth has been tied to productivity, for the girl who feels guilty resting, for the girl who only knows how to be strong. This is Jesus lovingly saying, you're allowed to stop. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to breathe. You are allowed to choose peace over pressure. You are allowed to put down the mental load you've been carrying alone. You are allowed to sit at his feet even when your to-do list is screaming. Jesus didn't ask Martha to be less capable. He asked her to be more connected. He wanted her heart, not her hustle. Her presence, not her performance. Her attention, not her anxiety. And girl, he wants the same from you. Here's the part of Martha's story that feels a little too familiar. She was doing everything for Jesus, just not with Jesus. And that's the blind spot so many high-achieving, high-capacity women run into without realizing it. We hustle for God, serve for God, show up for God, do ministry for God, help others for God, all while quietly drifting away from the intimacy that actually sustains us. It's not that Martha didn't love Jesus, she did, deeply. But somewhere along the way, her work for him started replacing her connection with him. And girl, this is where so many of us get trapped. We confuse spiritual activity with spiritual intimacy. We think because we're busy, we're being fruitful. But Jesus is showing us that busyness isn't always evidence of closeness. Let me say that again. Busyness isn't always evidence of closeness. You can read devotionals, listen to sermons, volunteer at church, help everyone in your life, and still not actually be with God. You can serve in every ministry and still never let your heart rest in his presence. You can be the hardest worker in the room and still feel spiritually empty. Because God doesn't want your performance, he wants your presence. Martha's blind spot wasn't lack of effort, it was lack of stillness. She didn't realize she'd been running on fumes, using productivity to validate her closeness to God. And baby, we do the same thing all the time. When was the last time you sat with God without multitasking? Without cleaning something while you pray? Without checking your phone during worship? Without trying to manage 100 responsibilities at once? Modern women are experts at productive spirituality, but we struggle with unstructured presence. We don't know how to just be quiet, be open, be still, be loved. And because we're uncomfortable with stillness, we drown ourselves in busyness thinking it makes us holy. But Martha shows us that there is a moment where doing becomes a distraction, where activity becomes avoidance, where helping becomes hiding, where we don't slow down enough to hear what God is actually trying to say. Jesus didn't correct Martha because she was working, he corrected her because she was distracted, because her heart was overwhelmed, because her mind was scattered, because her identity was tied to what she could produce, because she didn't know she was allowed to sit And girl, you are allowed to sit. You are allowed to slow down. You are allowed to not be on top of everything. You are allowed to choose presence over pressure. You don't have to earn God's love. You don't have to prove your worth. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to be the reliable one 24/7. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is stop doing. Martha's story doesn't end in her kitchen. She isn't frozen in one moment of overwhelm. In fact, one of the most beautiful parts of her narrative is how much she grows. Because when we see Martha again later in scripture, during one of the most heartbreaking moments of her life, she shows up as a completely different woman. Her brother Lazarus has died. The grief is raw. The loss is heavy. The situation feels final. And yet, when Jesus arrives, Martha doesn't run around managing the house or tending to the guests or distracting herself through busyness. She does something bold, something intimate, something emotionally honest. She walks straight up to Jesus and says, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." That's not performance. That's not hustle energy. That's not the voice of someone who believes she has to earn God's attention. That is a woman who has learned how to bring her heart directly to Jesus. She doesn't sugarcoat her disappointment. She doesn't hide her pain. She doesn't pretend everything is fine. She doesn't stuff her emotions under a to-do list. She speaks her truth with respect and honesty, and Jesus meets her right there. This is not the same Martha who is spiraling in the kitchen. This is a Martha who has learned intimacy, softness, surrender, emotional transparency, presence. And then Jesus reveals something extraordinary about her. Martha is not just a woman who serves, she is a woman who believes. She's the one who makes one of the most profound declarations of faith in the entire New Testament. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God. Do you realize how powerful that is? Peter is usually the one we celebrate for recognizing Jesus' identity, but Martha said it too. The busy girl, the overwhelmed sister, the one we often reduce to a cautionary tale. She wasn't defined by her burnout, she was transformed by her encounters with Jesus. Her evolution shows us something every woman needs to hear. You are allowed to grow past who you were in your overwhelmed season. You are not defined by your stress. You are not trapped in your busyness. You are not limited to your coping patterns. You can develop a deeper, more intimate relationship with God. You can learn stillness. You can learn presence. You can learn what real peace feels like. Martha became a woman who brought her emotions directly to Jesus instead of burying them under tasks. She became a woman of confidence, clarity, and spiritual insight. A woman who no longer believed she needed to earn time with God. She understood she already had access. Her journey tells us that your busy girl era doesn't have to be your forever era. You can grow, you can evolve, you can soften, you can deepen. God is patient with your transformation. Martha's story isn't here to shame the busy girl, it's here to free her. Because the truth is, every woman has both Martha and Mary inside her. There's the part of you that gets things done, handles responsibilities, keeps everyone afloat, and carries the invisible load that nobody sees. And there's the part of you, the Mary part, that craves rest, slowness, intimacy with God, time to breathe, time to feel, time to just be. The goal is not to kill your inner Martha. She's valuable, she's gifted, she's strong, she's needed. But she was never meant to run the show alone. When Martha leads without Mary, you burn out, you become resentful, you disconnect from God, you lose the joy behind your service. You start believing your worth is tied to what you produce. The key is balance, learning when to activate your Martha and when to honor your Mary. Your inner Martha shines when it's time to take responsibility, organize your life, show up for people, and steward what God has given you. But your inner Mary is the one who keeps your spirit alive. She's the one who pauses, listens, rests, worships, receives, heals, and reconnects with what matters most. Modern life constantly pulls us into Martha mode. Deadlines, work, school, expectations, relationships, social media, constant stimulation. But your soul was not designed for nonstop motion. Even Jesus withdrew to quiet places. Stillness is not laziness, it's spiritual maintenance. So ask yourself, where am I operating purely from my Martha energy? Where am I exhausted because I won't slow down? Where am I overwhelmed because I'm carrying everything alone? Where have I convinced myself that rest is optional, but responsibility is mandatory? Where am I serving God, but not actually sitting with Him? Sometimes God isn't asking you to stop working, He's asking you to stop working without Him. Sometimes He wants you to put the broom down and come sit at His feet. Sometimes He wants to remind you that He is not impressed by your hustle, He's moved by your heart. And sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is make a cup of tea, turn your phone off, take a deep breath, and just let God love you. Martha teaches us that service is holy, but stillness is healing. Mary teaches us that stillness is holy, but service is meaningful. Together, they model the Christian rhythm: presence first, productivity second. When your days flow from that order, when you start with God instead of squeezing Him into the edges of your schedule, everything gets lighter. Not because the responsibilities disappear, but because your spirit is no longer carrying them alone. This story invites every woman to reclaim her peace, protect her rest, and remember, you don't have to earn God's love. You just have to receive it. All right, holy girl, take one more deep breath with me. In and out, let your shoulders drop, let your mind unclench, let your spirit settle. Because Martha's story does something to us. It exposes the parts of our lives where we're running on fumes, functioning on autopilot, and carrying burdens we were never meant to hold alone. And I hope somewhere in today's episode you felt God whisper, you don't have to live like this. Martha isn't the villain of this story, she's the mirror, the reminder. The woman who shows us what happens when responsibility becomes identity and productivity becomes our love language. But she also shows us what transformation looks like when we actually let Jesus in. He didn't shame her, he didn't scold her, he didn't reject her. He guided her back into peace. And sis, he's doing the same for you. So if you've been overwhelmed, burnt out, overstimulated, or carrying the emotional weight of everyone around you, let this be your permission to slow down, to rest, to breathe, to stop proving and start receiving. You are allowed to sit at Jesus' feet. You are allowed to enjoy your life. You are allowed to exist without constantly performing readiness, responsibility, or perfection. And hey, if this is your first time tuning in, welcome to the sisterhood. I'm so glad you're here. Truly, you're safe here, you're seen here, you belong here. If today's episode hit home for you, if it made you feel seen, understood, called out in a loving way, or comforted, I want you to share it with another woman who might be in her busy girl era too. Sometimes the people we love need the reminder we were too overwhelmed to give ourselves. And make sure you're following the podcast so you never miss an episode. We're building something beautiful here, a sanctuary for modern women walking this wild, holy, exhausting, fulfilling life with God. If you ever want to send a prayer request, a testimony, or an episode suggestion, you can always reach me at holygirltalkpodcast@gmail.com. I love hearing from you. I pray over your messages, and I hold space for every story you share. Protect your peace this week, holy girl. Choose presence over performance. Let God carry what you've been dragging. I love you, and I'll see you in the next episode.